The wedding reception was winding down, the soft clinking of champagne glasses and murmur of conversation filling the air. I had just finished thanking the last of our guests when my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. With an apologetic glance at my new wife, I stepped away to take the call.
Come on, you're still working part-time jobs even on your wedding day?
A snide voice cut through my concentration. I looked up to see Ryan, my newly minted brother-in-law, leaning against a nearby pillar with a smirk on his face.
How many hours do you slave away for minimum wage? Must be tough being a high school dropout.
I bit back a retort, focusing on the important call I was handling. Ryan, however, seemed intent on needling me further.
Well, keep hustling at the bottom of the social ladder, Mr. Dropout.
He sneered, raising a champagne glass and a mock toast. What an annoying guy. Just as I was about to put him in his place, a sleek black luxury car pulled up in front of the reception venue. The purr of its engine cut off, and a stunningly beautiful woman stepped out, her high heels clicking against the pavement. Her sudden appearance caused a stir among the remaining guests. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Wow, she's gorgeous. Who is she?
A celebrity, maybe?
But whose guest could she be? The beautiful woman walked straight towards me, her gait purposeful and confident. I couldn't help but smile. Perfect timing. All the pieces were in place. Time to give my condescending brother-in-law a healthy dose of reality. My name is Jack Wilson. This story goes back to when I was in high school, a time that feels like a lifetime ago. Back then, I was just an ordinary high school student like any other, with dreams of college and a bright future ahead of me. But the peaceful daily life came to an abrupt end on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I remember it vividly. I was sprawled on the couch, thumbing through a comic book when the doorbell rang. Annoyed at being disturbed, I trudged to the door, only to find two solemn-faced police officers on our doorstep. "Are you Jack Wilson?" one of them asked, his voice grave. I nodded, a cold dread settling in the pit of my stomach. "I'm sorry to inform you, but your parents have been in a car accident." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My ears rang, drowning out the rest of the words. Accident, hospital, serious condition. I don't remember much of what happened next. It was all a blur of flashing lights, antiseptic hospital corridors, and hushed conversations. By the time the fog cleared, I was sitting in a sterile waiting room, my younger siblings huddled against me, as a doctor delivered news that would change our lives forever. "I'm very sorry," he said, his eyes filled with genuine sympathy. "We did everything we could, but your parents' injuries were too severe. They didn't make it." In that moment, my world shattered. My parents, the pillars of our family, were gone. Just like that. No goodbyes, no last words of wisdom. Just gone. The days that followed were a haze of grief, punctuated by the harsh realities of our new situation. As the oldest, at just 17, I was suddenly thrust into the role of caregiver for my younger sister and brother, both still in elementary school. When I thought about their future, I realized the money left to us was far too little. The life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses and outstanding bills. How are we supposed to survive? How can I ensure my siblings got the education and opportunities they deserved? That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. I decided to drop out of high school and start working. It wasn't an easy choice. My teachers tried to talk me out of it, offering to help find scholarships or financial aid. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. We needed stability, a steady income, and someone to be there for my siblings. That someone had to be me. So, with a heavy heart, I bid farewell to my dreams of college and entered the workforce. The place that hired me, a high school dropout with no experience, was a factory for a certain car manufacturer. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest and paid the bills. There, I started assembling car parts. My days filled with the rhythmic clanking of machinery and the acrid smell of metal and oil. Naturally, most of my coworkers were older men, their faces weathered by the years of hard work. But amidst a sea of gruff voices and calloused hands, there was a girl working there who was the same age as me. "Good morning, Emily," I said one day, nodding to the quiet girl with long black hair who worked at the station next to mine. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she replied with a shy smile. "Oh, good morning, Jack." Emily Davis was an enigma. In a workplace dominated by middle-aged men, she stood out like a delicate flower in a field of wheat. I couldn't help but wonder what circumstances had led her here, to this factory floor, instead of a high school classroom where she belonged. At first, we just exchanged greetings, but being the same age in a workplace full of adults, I secretly felt a connection to her. There was something comforting about seeing a familiar face, someone who was navigating the same choppy waters of adulthood before their time. However, we were both young and inexperienced, barely keeping up with the adult workers around us. The work was hard, the hours long, and the margin for error slim. I was clumsy and made a lot of mistakes. My hands, more accustomed to the holding pencils than power tools, often fumbled with the intricate parts we were assembling. Each mistake was met with a bark of disapproval from our supervisor, his patience wearing thin with each passing day. Unlike me, Emily was very careful, her slender fingers moving with precision that belied her age. But what she gained in accuracy, she lost in speed. It took her a long time to complete each part. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she triple-checked her work. We slow workers often get yelled at, but that day was particularly bad. "Hey! How long are you going to take, kid?" An employee shouted, his face red with anger as he directed his fury at Emily. I watched as Emily flinched, her shoulders hunching as if trying to make herself smaller. "I'm sorry. I'll finish right away." She apologized desperately, her hands shaking as she tried to complete her work. The pressure seemed to be making her even more nervous, causing her to fumble with the parts.
"Don't cause trouble for everyone else with your half-assed work, brat,"
the employee grumbled, his words full of thorns. It was no longer just a warning or scolding, but bordering on bullying. Emily looked like she was about to cry, hunching her shoulders even further and hanging her head. I could see tears gathering at the corner of her eyes, threatening to spill over.
"And you know what? I don't get how a slowpoke like you hasn't been fired yet. It's not fair that you get paid almost the same as us when you barely do any work."
Something in me snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I found myself shouting, "Stop it!" The factory floor fell silent, the usual cacophony of machinery momentarily drowned out by the echo of my voice. The employee turned towards me, his eyes narrowing dangerously as he slowly walked in my direction.
"Huh? You got a problem?"
He growled, looming over me. Despite the fear churning in my gut, I stood my ground. I think you're going too far," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "How can she work properly if you talk to her like that? She's doing her best."
"What did you say?"
He snarled, reaching out to grab me. I braced myself for the blow, but it never came. The employee seemed to notice that everyone around us was looking at us, the entire factory floor having ground to a halt to watch the confrontation. He clicked his tongue and walked away, looking embarrassed by the spectacle he caused. As soon as he was gone, Emily rushed to my side.
Jack? Thank you,"
she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt my face heat up, suddenly embarrassed by my outburst. "You're welcome. Sorry for making a scene." I apologized in return, rubbing the back of my neck awkwardly. But Emily shook her head vigorously.
"No, I'm happy. Thank you,"
she said, looking me straight in the eyes with a shy smile that made my heart skip a beat. That incident brought Emily and me closer, and we started talking more often. We'd eat lunch together, sharing stories about our lives outside the factory. I told her about my siblings, about the responsibility that weighed on my shoulders. She listened with rapt attention, her eyes filled with a mix of admiration and something else I couldn't quite place. One day, during lunch break, Emily and I were having a casual conversation when I noticed a notification on my smartphone. It was from my brother about tonight's dinner. Since I often get home late from work, my brother usually prepares dinner for us. It's not always edible. He once managed to burn water while trying to make pasta, but I appreciate his efforts. "I think we still have some ingredients left from the pot roast the other day. Maybe we'll have curry tonight," I muttered unconsciously while replying to my brother. I looked up to see Emily staring at me with an unreadable expression. "Oh, sorry. My brother was asking what we want for dinner," I explained, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "You get along well with your family," Emily said, looking at me with a mixture of envy and longing, before lowering her gaze with a distant expression. "What about your family?" I started to ask if she didn't get along with her family, but something made me hesitate. There was a sadness in her eyes that made me feel like I might be touching on a sensitive topic. "Yeah, we don't really get along," she murmured sadly, her fingers idly tracing patterns on the table. For a moment, we sat in silence, the usual chatter of the break room fading into the background. Then slowly, hesitantly, Emily began to open up about our family situation. Emily had a very successful older brother, a prodigy who had excelled in everything he touched. Her parents adored him and had sky-high expectations for his future. From a young age, Emily had been compared to her brother, always found wanting in the face of his achievements. "I was never as smart as him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I tried so hard, studied until my eyes hurt, but I could never match his grades. After a while, my parents, they just stopped trying with me." Emily, being less academically inclined, had been given the cold shoulder by her brother and even her parents. Every report card was met with disappointment, every parent-teacher conference ending in sighs and headshakes. "So they told me that going to high school would just be a waste of money, and I should start working after middle school," she finished, her voice cracking slightly. As she finished talking, Emily looked like she was about to burst into tears. The weight of years of disappointment and rejection seemed to press down on her slender shoulders. "Just so useless," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "I keep messing up at work too." "That's not true!" I interrupted her loudly, surprising even myself with the vehemence in my voice. She looked up at me, startled, our eyes meeting. I could see the tears threatening to spill over, and something in my chest tightened at the sight. "You might make mistakes sometimes, but I know you're more serious and hardworking than anyone else," I said, words tumbling out in a rush. "I've seen how carefully you work, how much effort you put into every single part. That's not useless, Emily. That's dedication." So don't put yourself down. You're doing great, Emily," I finished, slightly out of breath from my impromptu speech. For a moment, Emily just stared at me, her eyes wide with surprise. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was small and watery, but it was real. She nodded, her eyes still teary but her expression looking happier than I'd ever seen it. "Thank you, Jack," she said softly. I needed to hear that." As we went back to work that afternoon, I couldn't help but feel like something had shifted between us. We'd shared something important, a moment of vulnerability and support, and as I watched Emily work, her movements more confident than before, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the stuffy factory air. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of our journey together. Time is a funny way of slipping by when you're caught up in the rhythm of daily life. Before I knew it, several years had passed as we continued working at the factory. Emily and I had grown closer over that time. We grabbed coffee together before our shifts, shared lunches, and sometimes even walk home together when our schedules aligned. She became my confidant, the person I turned to when the weight of responsibility became too much to bear alone. But as much as I enjoyed our growing friendship, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something at the factory wasn't quite right. The more I worked, the more I started noticing several issues with the factory's operations. There were many unnecessary processes that seemed to slow everything down. On the shipping line, for instance, I noticed that multiple people were doing redundant tasks. They'd check and recheck the same components, wasting time and manpower that could be better used elsewhere. This inefficiency left other areas short-handed and caused delays. I'd watch as the assembly line would grind to a halt, waiting for parts that should have been readily available. What bothered me even more was the workload distribution. Physical demands placed on male and female employees were almost the same, making it clearly over-demanding for many of the women. I'd see Emily with other female co-workers struggling with heavy machinery, their faces strained with effort. After mulling over these issues for weeks, I decided to take action. I compiled my observations, backed them up with data I'd been quietly collecting, and drafted a comprehensive report. A mix of nervousness and determination, I presented my findings to the management along with specific improvement proposals. To my surprise and relief, the management took my suggestions seriously. They agreed to review the work systems with the higher-ups, promising to get back to me with their decision. Weeks passed, and I began to worry that my report had been forgotten or dismissed. But then, one day, the factory manager called me into his office. "Wilson," he said, his usually stern face breaking into a rare smile. "I wanted to thank you personally for your report. We've implemented some of your suggestions, and I must say, the results have been impressive." He showed me charts and graphs, concrete evidence of how work efficiency had improved dramatically since the changes were made. Productivity was up, workplace injuries were down, and employee satisfaction had skyrocketed. As word spread about the improvements, I gradually gained recognition from those around me. Coworkers who had once viewed me as just another face on the factory floor Now I sought out my opinion on various matters. When I first started working here, everything was unfamiliar and overwhelming. I was just a kid trying to fill adult-sized shoes, fumbling my way through each day. But now, as my evaluations improved and my confidence grew, I started to feel like I truly belonged. One day, as Emily and I were walking home after work, she turned to me with a bright smile.
Jack, you've been amazing lately. Everyone's saying how much smoother the work has become thanks to you.
I felt my face heat up at her praise. Thanks, I mumbled, feeling a mix of pride and embarrassment. Makes me happy to hear you say that.
Huh?
Emily tilted her head, a curious expression on her face. In that moment, looking at her under the warm glow of the setting sun, I was struck by a realization. I think I had been aware of my feelings for her since I first came here, but I'd always pushed them aside, too focused on work and taking care of my siblings. But now, watching her work so diligently every day, seeing her kind heart and unwavering spirit in the face of adversity, I couldn't deny it any longer. I was in love with Emily Davis. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure Emily could hear it. Before I could overthink it, I blurted out, "Emily, I like you. Will you go out with me?" The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Emily's eyes widened in surprise, faint blush creeping across her cheeks.
Are you sure you want someone like me?
She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The insecurity that I thought we left behind at the factory crept back into her eyes. "It has to be you. No one else will do," I said, words tumbling out in a rush. It was admittedly a cliché line, something straight out of a cheesy romance novel, but I meant every word. "You're kind, hardworking, and stronger than you give yourself credit for. You make me want to be a better person, Emily." For a moment, Emily just stared at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, brighter than I'd seen before. She nodded, happiness radiating from her entire being. And so, Emily and I started dating. Our relationship progressed smoothly, our years of friendship providing a solid foundation for our romance. We supported each other through the ups and downs of work, celebrated small victories, and dreamed of a future together. When I turned 30, I decided it was time to take the next step. With trembling hands and a heart full of love, I proposed to Emily. She said yes before I could even finish asking, throwing her arms around me in joy. I'd always dreamed of a life with her, and finally, that dream was coming true. Emily seemed just as happy, her eyes sparkling with excitement every time we talked about our future together. We spent countless evenings discussing our life after marriage, planning the wedding ceremony, debating where to go for our honeymoon. Emily wanted a beach vacation, while I was more inclined towards a mountain retreat. In the end, we compromised on a coastal town nestled at the foot of a mountain range, getting the best of both worlds. My siblings had known Emily for a while and got along well with her. After work, we often had dinner at my place with my brother and sister, enjoying a close family-like relationship. It warmed my heart to see how easily Emily fit into our little family unit, her presence filling a void we hadn't even realized was there. When we went to formally announce our engagement, my sister and brother wholeheartedly congratulated us on our marriage. My sister, now a teenager, squealed with delight and immediately started peppering Emily with questions about wedding dresses and color schemes. My brother, in his typical fashion, tried to play it cool, but couldn't hide the huge grin on his face. As we walked back to our apartment after being seen off by my siblings, Emily turned to me with a soft smile.
Your family is so nice, Jack. I wish I had siblings like this.
What are you talking about? They're your family now too, Emily, I said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze.
You're right,
she said, blushing happily. The joy in her eyes made my heart swell with love and gratitude. As we walked back to our apartment after being seen off by my siblings, we had this conversation. The evening was warm and the sky painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun set. It was a perfect moment, filled with hope and happiness. Suddenly, I remembered something important, something we've been putting off for far too long. Oh, that's right. We need to go greet your parents too. Despite dating for years, I had never met her family. Whenever I suggested visiting them, she would always avoid the topic, change the subject, or making excuses. I had respected her reluctance, knowing her relationship with them was strained. but now that we were engaged, it seemed unavoidable.
Yeah.
Emily's response was weak, her earlier happiness evaporating like morning dew under the harsh sun.
Emily?
I stopped walking, turned to look at her properly. The change in her demeanor was stark, her shoulders hunched and her eyes fixed on the ground. I knew that her family didn't think well of her, and that she was uncomfortable with them. The stories she had shared over the years painted a picture of a cold, unsupportive household that had left deep scars in Emily's self-esteem. But we couldn't get married without at least greeting them, could we?
It'll be okay,
I tried to reassure her, mustering up a confidence I didn't entirely feel.
We just need to say hello.
They're your family after all. Maybe seeing how happy we are together will help smooth things over.
I guess you're right.
She seemed terrified of meeting her family, squeezing out her words fearfully. Her hand trembled slightly in mine, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. I didn't say anything more, just gently put my arm around her shoulders as we continued our walk home. I wish I could shield her from her pain her family had caused, protect her from the harsh words and colder silences she had endured for years. But I knew that this was something we had to face together. As we reached our apartment building, Emily stopped suddenly.
Jack?
She said, her voice barely above a whisper.
What if they don't approve? What if they try to stop the wedding?
I turned to face her, taking both of her hands in mine.
Emily, listen to me,
I said, my voice firm but gentle.
No matter what happens with your family, it doesn't change how I feel about you.
If they can't see how amazing you are, then that's their loss. We're building our own family now, remember? Emily nodded, a small smile breaking through her worried expression.
You're right,
she said, squeezing my hands.
As long as we're together, we can face anything.
As we entered our apartment, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Emily's fear was palpable, and I wondered what kind of reception awaited us at our family home. Little did I know, the reality would be far worse than anything I had imagined. A few days later, we found ourselves standing in front of Emily's parents' house. It was a modest 2-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, but well-manicured lawn and neatly trimmed hedges. From the outside, it looked like a picture-perfect family home. But I knew better than to judge a book by its cover. Emily still looked anxious, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. She had contacted her family earlier in the week, informing them of our engagement and our desire to visit. The response had been lukewarm at best, but they had agreed to meet us.
Are you ready?
I asked softly, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself.
As ready as I'll ever be,
she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. With a nod, I reached down and rang the doorbell. The cheerful chime seemed at odds with the tension in the air. For a moment, there was silence, and then we heard footsteps approaching. The door swung open, revealing a middle-aged woman with Emily's dark hair and delicate features. This must be Emily's mother, I thought. But where Emily's eyes were warm and kind, this woman's gaze was cold and assessing as it swept over us.
Well, don't just stand there,
she said, her tone clipped.
Come in.
We stepped into a pristine living room where Emily's father and brother were waiting. Her father, a tall man with graying hair, sat in an armchair, his face set in a stern expression. The brother, Ryan, lounged on the sofa, an air of smug superiority emanating from him. Nice to meet you. I'm Jack Wilson, I began, bowing slightly. I'm here to...
Yeah. Spare us the formalities.
Emily's father's voice interrupted, his voice gruff and impatient. I was taken aback by this unexpected response and slowly raised my head from my bow. Emily stood next to me, looking uncomfortable and avoiding her father's gaze. The atmosphere in the room was so tense you could cut it with a knife.
We don't need any formal greetings. I don't care who takes this useless daughter off our hands.
Her father spat out these words, as if he couldn't care less about Emily or her future. I felt a surge of anger at his callous words, but before I could respond, Emily's mother chimed in.
That's right. You're fine with this good-for-nothing. Please take her away.
I was stunned by their attitude. How could parents speak about their own daughter this way? I glanced at Emily, seeing the hurt in her eyes even as she tried to maintain a neutral expression. It broke my heart to see her endure such cruelty from her own family. Swallowing my anger, I tried to steer the conversation in a more positive direction. Well, we're planning to have a wedding ceremony, so if you'd like to attend.
A wedding ceremony?
Her mother suddenly raised her voice, her expression changing from disinterest to outrage in an instant.
You can have a wedding ceremony if you want, but don't expect us to pay a single cent.
She continued, her voice shrill of indignation. Yes, we'll cover the cost ourselves, I assured her, trying to keep my voice calm and level.
Besides, do you poor people even have enough money for a wedding?
Emily's brother, who had been sitting on the sofa looking bored until now, suddenly asked. His voice dripped with condensation. I bit back a retort, reminding myself that we were here to make peace, not start a fight. But Ryan wasn't done.
By the way, you work at the same factory as my sister, right? What's your education?
He asked, leaning forward with a predatory gleam in his eyes. Huh? I was caught off guard by the sudden change in topic.
Your education? I'm asking where you went to college.
Ryan's voice was impatient, as if he was explaining something to a child. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the reaction. I started working after finishing middle school, so I didn't go to college.
What? Seriously? So you're a middle school dropout?
Ryan's eyes widened in mock surprise, a cruel smile playing on his lips.
Wow, a dropout, just like our sister. That's pretty rare these days.
He leaned back, his posture radiating smug superiority.
You know, having another uneducated person in the family, that's a problem.
I clenched my fist, fighting the urge to defend myself and Emily, but I knew that engaging with their taunts would only make things worse. Ryan wasn't done with his tirade.
I went to Harvard, you know. All my friends were highly educated. Having family members who are dropouts, that's just unacceptable. Ryan has been so smart,
His mother chimed in, her voice filled with pride.
and he works for a top company too. He's really our pride and joy. Compare that to his sister. I wonder where we went wrong with her.
The parents happily bragged about their son, seemingly forgetting that Emily was standing right there, hearing every word. Emily's brother glanced at us sideways, smirking condescendingly. I could feel Emily trembling beside me, and I longed to wrap my arms around her, to shield her from their cruel words, but I knew any show of affection would likely be met with more derision.
You two are becoming a nuisance,
Ryan said, his voice dripping with disdain.
Why don't you just leave? Having incompetent, uneducated people like you in the house is ruining the atmosphere. Your stupidity might be contagious. That's right. Conversation is over, isn't it? If you have no more business here, please leave.
The mother said, making shooting motions with her hands as if we were stray animals she was chasing away.
Take the girl with you, and don't ever associate with our family again. We don't want the neighbors to know we have any connection to people like you.
The father added, his whole body language saying he had said everything he wanted to say, and we should get out immediately. I was about to turn and leave, to get Emily away from this toxic environment, when Ryan spoke up again.
Oh, but we'll come to the wedding,
He said, still maintaining his mocking attitude and grinning.
I'm interested in seeing the pathetic ceremony of two dropouts. It should be entertaining at least.
That was the last straw. I opened my mouth ready to tell him exactly what I thought of the behavior, but Emily's hand on my arm stopped me. She shook her head slightly, her eyes pleading with me to let it go. Then, we'll take our leave, I managed to say through gritted teeth, my voice tight with suppressed anger. As we stepped out of the house, I heard Emily's mother mutter,
Good riddance,
before slamming the door behind us. On our way back, we walked in heavy silence, both of us too shocked and hurt to speak. The weight of what had just transpired hung heavily between us, casting a shadow over what should have been a happy time in our lives. I wasn't sure how to comfort Emily, who looked so sad and defeated. If they only had insulted me, I might have been able to bear it. But their attitude, treating us both like idiots, was unforgivable. More than anger, I felt a deep, aching frustration. Both Emily and I had been working hard regardless of our education. We knew that better than anyone. We had built our lives for ourselves, supported each other, and found happiness together. Why did we have to be treated like that? Thinking that Emily had grown up feeling this unreasonable treatment all along made my heart ache. I'm sorry, Emily muttered quietly as she walked dejectedly beside me, her shoulders slumped and her gaze fixed on the ground. It's okay. You don't need to apologize, Emily, I said gently, taking her hand in mine. None of this is your fault. Emily, looking apologetic with slumped shoulders, seemed to have lost all her energy. It was understandable. Meeting her parents after a long time, only to be insulted instead of congratulated on her marriage. I tried desperately to find the right words to comfort her, to reassure her that their opinions didn't matter. "We don't have to have a wedding ceremony," she said softly, her voice trembling. "My family would probably just cause trouble again." "Don't worry about that," I said, stopping and turning to face her. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Besides, I want to show my siblings and relatives how beautiful you'll look as a bride. My sister and brother are really looking forward to it." Emily looked up at me, a small smile breaking through her sadness. "Yeah, thank you. I'm feeling a bit better now." She returned to her usual bright expression. I could still see the hurt lingering in her eyes, but she was trying, and that's what mattered. We were about to build a new family together. We couldn't stay depressed. I wanted her to always be smiling, to know that she was loved and valued, regardless of what our family thought. Seeing her smile, even if it was a bit forced, I felt reassured too. We would get through this together. After that, we started walking again, talking as usual with the sunset sky at our backs. We discussed our wedding plans, pointedly avoiding any mention of Emily's family. Instead, we focused on the positive, the friends who would attend, the music we would play, the food we would serve. As we walked, I made a silent promise to myself. I would work harder than ever, not just for my siblings, but for Emily too. I would build a life where she never had to feel inadequate or unloved again. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to prove her family just how wrong they were about both of us. Little did I know, the opportunity to do just that was closer than I could have imagined. The months leading up to our wedding were a whirlwind of planning, preparation, and anticipation. Despite the dark cloud of Emily's family disapproval hanging over us, we were determined to make our special day a joyous celebration of our love. Finally, the long-awaited wedding day arrived. The venue, a charming little chapel on the outskirts of town, was decorated with white roses and lilies, Emily's favorite flowers. Soft music played in the background as the guests began to arrive. My siblings, relatives, and old friends came to celebrate our marriage. The atmosphere was festive, filled with laughter and warm congratulations. My sister, now a poised young woman, helped Emily with last-minute adjustments to her dress, while my brother, looking sharp in a suit, greeted guests with a big grin. However, Emily's parents and brother remained unchanged. They arrived late, their faces set in expressions of bored disdain. Ryan, in particular, seemed determined to make his displeasure known.
As expected from dropouts, even the ceremony is this shabby.
Ryan sneered loudly enough for others to hear, his voice cutting through the gentle murmur of conversation. I felt my jaw clench, but I forced myself to take a deep breath and let it go. This was our day, and I wouldn't let Ryan's pettiness ruin it. Emily's parents also seemed uninterested throughout the ceremony, looking like they were just waiting for it to end quickly. They sat stiffly in the front row, not even cracking a smile as Emily walked down the aisle, looking radiant in her white gown. As we exchanged vows, I could see tears of joy in Emily's eyes. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not our family's disapproval, not our humble beginnings, nothing but the love we shared. After the ceremony, while everyone was mingling during the reception, I received a work call on my cell phone. I excused myself and stepped aside to take it, responding politely to what seemed to be an urgent matter. Seeing me on the phone, Ryan approached with a malicious grin.
Hey, is that a call from your part-time job? Working even at a time like this? Must be tough being a dropout. Slaving away for minimum wage.
I tried to ignore him, focusing on the call, but he continued his taunting.
I could earn your lifetime wages in seconds, you know. Well, I guess you should be grateful that anyone would hire someone with such poor education. Keep working hard at the bottom of society.
I wasn't sure how to respond to his unnecessary provocation. Part of me wanted to put him in his place, to reveal the truth about my position, but I knew it wasn't the right time or place. This was supposed to be a celebration of love, not a platform for settling scores. Just then, a sleek black luxury car pulled up in front of the wedding venue. The purr of its high-performance engine turned heads as it came to a stop. The door opened and a stunningly beautiful woman stepped out, her designer dress and impeccable makeup marking her as someone of importance. Her sudden appearance caused a stir among the guests. Whispers rippled through the crowd.
Wow, she's beautiful. Who could she be?
A celebrity, maybe?
But whose guest is she?
Caught up in the atmosphere like everyone else, Ryan's attention also shifted to the woman. His eyes widened appreciatively as he took in her appearance.
Whoa, she's super hot.
He exclaimed, a lecherous grin spreading across his face.
Maybe I'll take her home tonight.
He added crudely, starting to walk towards her. As the woman made her way into the venue, Ryan intercepted her path.
Hey, beautiful. Are you someone's acquaintance?
He asked, his voice dripping with what he probably thought was charm.
This boring ceremony. Why don't we slip out and have a drink together?
However, the woman completely ignored Ryan, walking past him as if he didn't exist. Her eyes scanned the room, clearly searching for someone.
Hey, don't ignore me, that's rude.
Ryan called out, his face flushing with anger and embarrassment. But the woman paid him no mind. She walked straight towards me, her heels clicking decisively on the polished floor. Mr. CEO, I've come to pick you up, she said as she approached, bowing respectfully. Ryan, who had followed her, looked between us with a confused expression.
Huh? What are you talking about? This guy is just a dropout.
The woman turned to Ryan, her professional demeanor cracking slightly to reveal irritation. CEO, what's with this delusional man? He's really annoying. Not waiting for Ryan to finish his spurting response, she turned back to me. Sir, I was fully aware that today was your wedding day, but we just received a call from a client wanting to have a business meeting now. I apologize for the intrusion, but they insisted it was urgent. I nodded, understanding the situation. I understand. Thank you for coming to inform me personally.
What? What's going on? What does this mean?
Ryan was the only one who couldn't follow the conversation, looking flustered and increasingly agitated. The woman, who I now recognized as my personal assistant, Sarah, turned to Ryan with an expression of disbelief. You're a relative, aren't you? Don't you know anything about him?
This guy is just a dropout working part-time jobs, right?
Ryan insisted, his voice rising in pitch. Sarah's professional mask slipped completely as she let out an exasperated sigh. No, this man is the CEO of Wilson Industries.
What?
Ryan's jaw dropped, his eyes bulging in shock. Seemingly exasperated by Ryan's attitude and the need to explain, Sarah began to recount my background, her voice taking on a slightly lecturing tone. A few years after Mr. Wilson started dating Miss Emily, his proposal for improving work efficiency was highly valued by the company. He was scouted by the headquarters and quickly rose through the ranks due to his innovative ideas and leadership skills. Ryan listened in stunned silence as Sarah continued. After he started working at the headquarters, Mr. Wilson developed a desire to have his own company. Having started working right after dropping out of high school, he had seen various aspects of this industry and had many ideas he wanted to realize. I watched as the color drained from Ryan's face with each word Sarah spoke. Finally, at 26, Mr. Wilson managed to start his own company. Wilson Industries manufactures parts used in car engines. There were struggles after starting the business, but he used everything he had learned through his work experience to improve performance. As they expanded their business, they started manufacturing various other parts as well. Sarah's voice swelled with pride as she delivered the final blow to Ryan's ego. Now, it has grown into a major corporation well known in the industry. Mr. Wilson is considered one of the most innovative young CEOs in the automotive sector. Ryan's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. Finally, he managed to stammer out.
You're seriously the CEO of Wilson Industries?
I nodded, maintaining a neutral expression despite the satisfaction I felt at seeing Ryan's arrogance crumble. That's correct. Come to think of it, you work for Emotion Corp, don't you, brother-in-law?
Yeah, but...
Ryan stuttered, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. I'm about to have a meeting with your company's CEO, I said casually, as if I was discussing the weather. I'll put in a good word for you. As I said this, the color drained completely from Ryan's face. He looked like he might faint at any moment. Emily's parents, who had been listening nearby, hurriedly approached us. Their earlier disinterest had vanished, replaced by an almost comical eagerness.
We had no idea he was such an accomplished person,
Emily's father exclaimed, his expression replaced by an ingratiating smile. Her mother was quick to jump in. Why don't we all have dinner sometime? We'd love to hear more about your work. Then turning to Emily with a sudden show of affection that made my stomach turn, she added, Oh, Emily, you clever girl. To think you caught such a wonderful CEO. As expected of our daughter. They frankly tried to change their attitude, but neither Emily nor I had any intention of associating with her family anymore. Their sudden change of heart was transparent and insulting. "No thank you," I said, my voice firm and cold. "As you told us to never associate with you again, we have no intention of interacting with you in the future." They stood there, dumbfounded by my rejection. Emily, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "That's right," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Don't ever show up in front of us again." Enraged by her refusal, her parents tried to grab Emily's arm, but they were quickly restrained by the nearby venue staff and dragged away.
What the hell? You ungrateful brat!
Ryan shouted, but the staff continued to escort him out as well, while the other guests looked on with cold stares. As Emily's family was being removed from the venue, I could hear snippets of conversation from the shocked guest.
An employee of Emotion Corp? Shouldn't you at least recognize the CEO of a major client?
Someone in the crowd muttered.
Those people had such a bad attitude the whole time. How unpleasant.
Another guest commented, shaking their head in disapproval. With those words seeing them off, Emily's family was unceremoniously kicked out of the venue. As the doors closed behind them, it felt like a chapter of our lives was closing as well. I turned to Emily, worried about how she was handling this dramatic turn of events. To my surprise and relief, I saw not sadness or regret in her eyes, but a quiet strength and even a hint of amusement. "Well," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "That wasn't quite how I imagined introducing you to my family." I couldn't help but chuckle at her understatement. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, taking her hands in mine. "I know this isn't how you wanted our wedding day to go." She shook her head, squeezing my hands. "Don't be sorry. The first time in my life, I stood up to them. And it's all thanks to you, Jack. You've given me the strength and confidence I never knew I had." I was about to respond when Sarah cleared her throat politely, reminding me of the pending business meeting. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, feeling torn. "I have to go to this important meeting even on such a special day." Emily smiled and faltered. "Don't worry about it. Go ahead. I understand how important your work is to you. I love how hardworking you are, Jack." My heart swelled with love and gratitude for this amazing woman who had chosen to share her life with me.
Good luck with work, bro,
my younger brother called out from where he was standing with my sister.
"Well, take care of Emily. Go on, get going,"
my sister added, coming over to link arms with Emily. Smiling, they waved goodbye as I got into the car with Sarah. As we pulled away from the venue, I looked back to see Emily surrounded by her friends and family, laughing and celebrating. Despite the drama with her family, our wedding day had turned out to be beautiful after all. As we drove towards the meeting, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This meeting could be the start of something big for Wilson Industries. More importantly, it was a chance to show the world, and Emily's family, that success isn't determined by your education or your background, but by your determination, hard work, and vision. Little did I know, this meeting would be the catalyst for changes that would reshape not just our lives, but the entire industry. In the weeks following our wedding, life settled into a new rhythm. Emily and I were blissfully happy, enjoying the early days of our marriage and looking forward to our future together. But as much as we tried to put the incident with her family behind us, there were still loose ends to tie up. One morning, as I was preparing for work, I received a call from an unknown number. It was the CEO of Emotion Corp, Ryan's employer.
"Mr. Wilson,"
he began, his voice grave.
"I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I felt I needed to speak with you directly about a matter concerning your brother-in-law, Ryan Davis."
I listened as he detailed a litany of complaints against Ryan. Although he had maintained a good facade with his superiors, it turned out he had been engaging in power harassment and sexual harassment towards his subordinates. The CEO had launched an investigation following our encounter at the wedding, and the results were damning.
"We value our partnership with Wilson Industries greatly," the CEO continued. "I want to assure you that we do not condone such behavior in any way. Ryan Davis will face severe consequences for his actions."
I thanked him for his call and reassured him that my personal relationships would not affect our business dealings. After hanging up, I sat for a moment, processing the information. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction at Ryan's comeuppance, but mostly, I felt sad for Emily. No matter how terribly they had treated her, they were still her family. Later that day, I gently broke the news to Emily. She listened silently, her expression a mixture of shock and resignation. "I can't say I'm surprised," she said finally. "Ryan always did think he was above the rules. I just hope this teaches him some humility. As we predicted, Ryan faced severe repercussions for his actions. He was demoted to a subsidiary company, a significant step down from his prestigious position at Motion Corp headquarters. However, karma wasn't done with Ryan yet. Rumors of misconduct spread quickly in the industry grapevine. The once proud Harvard graduate found himself shunned by his former social circle. His networking opportunities dried up, and headhunters who had once courted him now wouldn't return his calls. Unable to bear the loss of status and the constant whispers behind his back, Ryan quit his job. While with his tarnished reputation circling in the industry, he couldn't return to a major corporation. Even small companies, wary of potential liability, wouldn't hire him. Now, in a twist of irony, that would have been amusing if it wasn't so sad. I heard through the grapevine that Ryan was doing the very part-time jobs he used to mock. He was living in a cheap apartment, struggling to make ends meet. Far cry from the luxurious lifestyle he once flaunted. Emily's parents, who had always boasted about their son to others, became the subject of neighborhood gossip due to Ryan's job loss and the commotion at the wedding ceremony. Their carefully cultivated image of the perfect family with the perfect son had crumbled overnight. Moreover, the neighbors had never thought well of Emily's parents due to their harsh treatment of her. Now, with their golden child fallen from grace, years of pent-up resentment bubbled to the surface.
It's all your fault for treating Emily like that.
I heard Emily's mother had screamed at her father during one particularly heated argument that had spilled out into their front lawn.
What? You're the one who started all this!
Her father had bellowed back, their voices carrying to the curious ears of their neighbors. They had blamed each other, and the atmosphere at home deteriorated rapidly. Unable to bear it any longer, her parents divorced a few years later and now live modest lives in separate areas. We haven't had any contact with them since the wedding day, so we don't know the details, but it's not hard to imagine how they've fallen from grace due to a single mistake. Their story became a cautionary tale in their social circles about the dangers of arrogance and fickle nature of status. As for us, our lives took a decidedly different trajectory. Wilson Industries continued to grow and thrive under my leadership. Our innovative approach to manufacturing and our commitment to employee welfare made us stand out in the industry. We expanded into new markets, diversified our product line, and even ventured into green technology. With our growing success came financial stability beyond what we had ever imagined. We built a beautiful house in an upscale residential area, far cry from the tiny apartment we had shared in our early days. More importantly, we filled it with love and laughter. A year after our wedding, we were blessed with a much-awaited child. Our daughter, Sophia, was born on a crisp autumn morning. Her arrival filling our hearts with joy we had never known before. The birth of our child, our home feels even livelier, filled with the sounds of giggles and pitter-pattering feet. Now, we're building a happy, bright family life with the three of us. Our days are busy but fulfilling. Perfect balance of work and family time. In the evenings, after Sophia is tucked into bed, Emily and I often sit on our porch, looking out at the stars and marveling at how far we've come.
Can you believe it?
Emily asked one such evening, her head resting on my shoulder.
If someone had told me 10 years ago that this would be my life, I never would have believed them.
I squeezed her hand, thinking back to those early days in the factory. We've come a long way, haven't we? Emily nodded, a contented smile on her face.
We have. And you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. All those struggles, all that pain, it led us here.
Her words made me reflect on our journey. It hadn't been easy, but every obstacle we faced had only made us stronger, both individually and as a couple. Unfortunately, people who look down on others because of their educational background exist everywhere. We've encountered our fair share of skeptics and naysayers even after my success became well known. There are still those who can't believe that a dropout could achieve so much. However, a person's true value can never be measured by education alone. Our experiences have taught us that determination, hard work, and integrity are far more important than any degree or a diploma. Like Ryan, even if you're highly educated and work for a prestigious company, if you use that to look down on others, any impressive background becomes nothing more than a decoration. True success, we've learned, is not just about personal achievements, but about how you treat others and the positive impact you have on the world around you. As parents, Emily and I are determined to instill these values in our daughter. We want to teach Sophia that what's truly important can never be measured by academic credentials alone.
How do we make sure Sophia understands this?
Emily asked one evening as we watched our daughter play in the background. I don't want her to ever feel the way I did growing up, but I also don't want her to take our success for granted. I nodded, understanding her concern. It was a delicate balance we needed to strike. I think the key is to lead by example, I said after a moment of reflection. We'll encourage her to work hard and pursue her passions, whatever they may be. But more importantly, we'll show her the value of kindness, empathy, and respect for others, regardless of their background. Emily smiled, leaning into me. You're right, and we'll make sure she knows our story. The real story. Not just the success, but the struggles too. And so, as Sophia grew, we made a point of sharing our journey with her. We told her our days in the factory, about the challenges we faced and the lessons we learned. We took her to visit the old neighborhood where we used to live, showing her the small apartment that was our first home together.
But Daddy,
She asked one day, her big eyes wide with curiosity.
if you didn't go to college, how'd you become so successful?
I smiled, picking her up and setting her on my knee. Well, sweetheart, I worked very hard and never stopped learning. Just because I wasn't in school didn't mean I couldn't educate myself. I read books, asked questions, and learned from every job I had. And most importantly, I treated people with respect and kindness, no matter who they were. As Sophia grew older, she began to understand more about the world and the complexities of society. We made sure to expose her to people from all walks of life, volunteering at local shelters and participating in community events. We wanted her to see firsthand that a person's worth isn't determined by the job title or the size of their house. In my professional life, I made it a point to create opportunities for others who might be overlooked by traditional hiring practices. Wilson Industries implemented programs to hire and train individuals without formal education, but with drive and potential. We partner with local schools to provide internships and mentorship programs, giving young people exposure to the business world regardless of their academic standing. One day, I was giving a tour of our main factory to a group of high school students. I noticed a young man hanging back from the group. He reminded me so much of myself at that age, eager to learn but unsure of his place in the world. After the tour, I approached him. What did you think? I asked. He looked surprised that I was addressing him directly.
It's amazing, sir.
He said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm.
I never knew there was so much that goes into making car parts.
I smiled, recognizing the spark of curiosity in his eyes. What's your name?
Tom, sir. Tom Johnson.
Well, Tom, are you interested in engineering? He nodded eagerly, then his face fell.
I'm not very good at school. My grades, they're not great.
I put a hand on his shoulder. Tom, let me tell you a secret. I was terrible at school too. In fact, I dropped out. But that didn't stop me from learning and working hard. If you're really interested in this field, there are always opportunities for those who are willing to put in the effort. Tom's eyes widened.
Really? But how?
I explained to him about our apprenticeship program, designed for students who might not be on the traditional college track, but showed promise and dedication. By the end of our conversation, Tom's whole demeanor had changed. He stood taller, his eyes shining with newfound hope. As I watched him leave the rest of his class, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This, I realized, was the true measure of success. Not the money in my bank account or the size of my company, but the ability to lift others up and show them their own potential. That evening, I shared the encounter with Emily. She listened with a warm smile, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You know, she said, taking my hand, moments like these make me fall in love with you all over again. You're changing lives, Jack. Not just mine and Sophia's, but so many others too. Her words touched me deeply. We're changing lives together, I corrected her gently. I couldn't have done any of this without you by my side. As years passed, Wilson Industries continued to grow and evolve. We expanded into new markets, always with an eye towards innovation and social responsibility. Our hiring practices and community outreach programs gained recognition, and soon, other companies were looking to us as a model for inclusive business practices. One day, I received an invitation to speak at a prestigious business conference. The topic? Redefining success in the modern business world. As I stood on the stage, looking out at the sea of faces, some skeptical, some curious, some openly admiring, I took a deep breath and began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack Wilson, and I'm on a high school dropout. A murmur ran through the crowd. I could see some people shifting uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward with interest. I'm also the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, a loving husband, proud father, and a member of a community that I strive to uplift every day. My journey has taught me that success isn't about the degrees on your wall or the size of your paycheck. It's about the lives you touch, the positive changes you create, and the legacy you leave behind. As I continue my speech, sharing our story and the lessons we learned along the way, I could see the audience becoming more engaged. But at the end, there was a palpable energy in the room, a sense of possibilities opening up. After the conference, I was approached by numerous business leaders, all eager to learn more about our inclusive hiring practices and community engagement programs. It was clear that our story had struck a chord, challenging traditional notions of success and opening up conversations about the true value of diversity in the workplace. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how far we've come, from a pair of high school dropouts working in a factory to leaders in our industry and advocates for social change. It had been quite a journey. When I arrived home, I found Emily and Sophia waiting for me on the porch. Sophia, now a teenager, ran to greet me with a hug. "How did it go, Dad?" she asked eagerly. I smiled, putting an arm around her shoulders. "It went well, sweetheart. I think we might have changed a few minds today." Emily joined us, slipping her hand into mine. "I'm so proud of you," she said softly. As we stood there, the three of us together, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Despite all the challenges we'd faced, all the obstacles we'd overcome, we built a life filled with love, purpose, and meaning. To demonstrate that educational background doesn't matter, I want to continue achieving results that no one can match and prove it through my actions. But more than that, I want to create a world where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their background or circumstances. From now on, I'll continue to work my hardest for the sake of my company, my family, and all those who need a chance to prove themselves. With this determination, I set off for work today as well, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. As I close this chapter of our story, I'm reminded of a quote I once read. "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." Our journey is far from over. There will be new challenges to face, new heights to reach, and new lives to touch. But with Emily by my side and Sophia lighting our way, I know we're ready for whatever comes next. After all, our greatest adventure, the adventure of making a positive difference in the world, is only just beginning.